What OSHA inspectors check in 2026. Most EHS programs miss. What OSHA inspectors are actually checking in 2026 is not what most EHS programs were built for. The OSHA inspection many facilities prepared for 5 years ago is not the inspection environment they are operating in today. Enforcement priorities have shifted, inspection weighting methods have evolved, and heat illness enforcement is expanding, even without a finalized federal standard. Many EHS programs still reflect older audit assumptions that no longer align with how inspections are being conducted. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, conducted 34,625 inspections in fiscal year 2024. In recent years, the agency has been transitioning away from its previous inspection weighting tool, the OSHA Weighting System, OWS, toward the Enforcement Impact Index, EI, which places greater emphasis on inspections tied to significant hazards, national emphasis initiatives, and broader enforcement priorities. The practical impact for EHS teams is straightforward. Inspection activity is increasingly concentrated around specific hazard categories and documentation expectations. Facilities operating under audit protocols built years ago may find that their programs no longer align with the hazards OSHA is prioritizing today. OSHA's emphasis initiatives are driving inspection priorities. OSHA's national and regional emphasis initiatives provide one of the clearest indicators of where programmed inspections are focused. Current initiatives heavily target hazards such as falls, machine guarding, confined spaces, respirable silica, combustible dust, and heat illness prevention. For facilities in manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, and construction, those categories increasingly function as operational inspection checklists. Inspectors arriving under programmed inspection initiatives are typically evaluating facilities against current enforcement priorities rather than conducting broad, generic compliance reviews. A machine guarding program that technically complies with existing standards but has not been reviewed against recent emphasis guidance or updated inspection trends may not receive the same scrutiny outcome as one that has been actively maintained and documented. Interpretation letters are shaping enforcement expectations. OSHA interpretation letters explain how the agency applies existing standards to specific workplace scenarios. They do not create new regulations or independent legal requirements, but they increasingly shape how inspectors evaluate whether facilities are applying standards in line with current enforcement expectations. For EHS teams, that creates a growing operational challenge. Many compliance programs were developed years before more recent interpretation guidance existed, particularly in areas involving confined spaces, complex equipment configurations, machine safeguarding, and multi-employer work sites. A confined space program may technically satisfy the underlying standard while still drawing inspection scrutiny if hazard assessments, training records, or entry procedures do not reflect how OSHA currently interprets those obligations in practice. In many inspections, interpretation letters increasingly function as practical enforcement guidance for how compliance is evaluated in the field. Heat illness enforcement continues to expand without a final rule. The agency continues using the General Duty Clause to pursue heat-related citations in both outdoor and high-temperature indoor environments. Under that framework, OSHA must demonstrate that employers exposed workers to a recognized hazard without implementing reasonable protective measures. Inspectors are increasingly reviewing written heat illness programs alongside acclimatization procedures, supervisor training records, environmental monitoring documentation, hydration and rest protocols, and records demonstrating active field implementation during heat events. In many inspections, the distinction between a citation and a compliant outcome comes down to whether facilities can demonstrate active monitoring, training, and response documentation rather than relying solely on written policies. State plan states are creating additional compliance exposure. 22 states and 2 territories operate OSHA-approved state plans, several of which impose requirements that exceed federal OSHA baselines. California remains one of the most aggressive enforcement environments for multi-site operators. Senate Bill S-606 expanded California Division of Occupational Safety and Health Cal OSHA authority to issue enterprise-wide citations for certain patterns of violations, significantly increasing potential exposure for large employers operating across multiple facilities. Other state plan states continue expanding ergonomics, heat illness, and workplace safety requirements beyond federal standards. Minnesota maintains ergonomics requirements covering certain high-risk sectors, while Oregon and Washington continue advancing heat illness and ergonomics-related rulemaking and guidance. For companies operating across multiple jurisdictions, a compliance framework designed solely around federal OSHA standards may leave state-level gaps that are not identified until an inspection occurs, where EHS programs are commonly falling behind. Across industries, several recurring compliance gaps continue appearing during inspections. Programs that reflect the text of older standards but not current enforcement interpretations. Heat illness documentation that exists on paper but does not demonstrate active seasonal monitoring and implementation. State-specific requirements that were never integrated into site-level compliance procedures. Audit schedules that have not been updated to reflect OSHA's current emphasis, priorities, and inspection focus areas. None of these gaps require a catastrophic incident to become enforcement problems. In many cases, they simply require an inspector and a records request. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.